America is back and open for business. One thing we're going to be demanding is we're going to be demanding respect from other nations. We just want to be treated fairly with other nations because there's hardly a nation in the world, and I blame this on us, and I blame it on politicians that, for some reason, probably mostly it's stupidity, but you could also say other reasons, but mostly stupidity. They've allowed other nations to take advantage of the U.S., and we can't allow that to happen anymore.
That was to the World Economic Forum. Not enough has been said about the background that Trump uses there. Remember Biden had this background. He made like a made-up set. It was like a set of like a Bush League Oval Office or something. It was like a pathetic. That's an awesome background for Trump to be speaking the truth to the world. And Mike Baker's here, the great Mike Baker, host of the President's Daily Brief. Mike, great to talk to you, brother. My first question is,
thank you, man. And listen, before we get started, thank you for stepping in when I was overseas for the President's Daily Brief. Really appreciate that, and got nothing but great feedback, and everybody loved you, almost loved you too much. So.
No, that's not. No, I didn't want to put my best foot forward, Mike. You know what I mean? I did. No,
it was my I will say the only problem is you left the studio kind of cluttered with empty beer cans and empty bourbon bottles. But other than that, it was a great experience.
Listen, that's a small tax that you have to pay. That's no big deal, right? I got to leave some mark behind, right?
Right.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for letting me do it. How important is our foreign aid to other countries? And I guess the point of that question is, how much leverage do we really have over other countries?
Yeah, you know what? It's really horses for courses, right? By that I mean it depends on the country, it depends on the nature of the aid, it depends on the moment, right? Is it wartime aid? Is it humanitarian aid in a crisis, or is it just something that's always been there and the establishment, once something's in place, never changes it, right? Look, the establishment. Whether we're talking about the U.S. Or whether we're talking globally, their heads are exploding right now, right? Because they love nothing more than status quo, right? Being comfortable and being in a position that they can understand and they can predict, and they know that they'll always be in that position. So freezing foreign aid to the degree that President Trump has done now in this short period of time that they've been in office, with the eye towards reviewing the dollars that are going overseas, people should actually be happy. U.S. taxpayers should be happy that that's happening, knowing that some of that aid is wasted, some of it is critical and will be reinstated, and some other needs will probably be identified and will be funded at that point.
Yeah, that has to be just terrifying for these people who are only used to the status quo. They're finally being questioned. They finally, like in that scene in Office Space, have to go in front of the two guys and answer the question, what does it say you do here exactly? And is this a good use of taxpayer money? So what fear do other countries have in this? Like, I can understand the American NGO person, right? But like, what can we do with other countries? What's the effect of that? These freezes of spending.
Yeah, look, I think what it does is a couple of things. It forces some level of transparency, both on the recipient and also the U.S. government, to explain the purpose of the aid, to drill down and talk about it in more detail than they tend to. It will probably, I'm just going out on a limb here and saying in some circumstances, it will help to mitigate corruption that exists in the world of foreign aid, whether it's an NGO, whether it's government to government, whatever it may be, because that definitely exists. There's a lot of money over the years that has gone missing. And whether we're talking about money going to the Taliban, for instance, or going to Gaza, supposedly to help the civilians, and it ends up lining the pockets of the billionaire leadership of Hamas. Whether we're talking about, aid to Africa, where in some of these countries, you think, how have they not improved their conditions? Well, it's because a lot of times the despotic leaders are pocketing that money. So I think it will help to mitigate that corruption. But look, some foreign aid, there's no doubt about it. Some of it is crucial, is critical, right? We don't live in a bubble. So nobody should imagine that freezing foreign aid means suddenly we're drawing the curtains around the U.S. and saying, that's it. Everybody else, you're on your own. That's not how this is going to work. And it can't work that way because, the world is too interconnected and there are still elements out there that are hostile to our interests, and there'll be vacuums. If we pull back aid in certain areas, to certain countries, the Chinese regime will sweep in there. And they've been making that effort for a couple of decades now.
Yes, great point. Obviously China, but sorry, let me start with this. We kicked off the show talking about the little mini trade war with Colombia that lasted like an hour, that Trump just swatted him around. Yeah. Are there other countries out there, though, that can match Trump and can match the American economy and the American military might in a way that Trump can't just slap him around on a golf course for an hour? Colombia is obviously not one of those. China would be. Are there any other countries out there that we would need to be on the lookout for?
Not really. I suppose in a sense you could argue that we have to be careful with the members of the nuclear club, right? There's always that concern. So we have to be somewhat mindful of the nature of the country we're talking about. How hostile are they to U.S. interests? But there's really nobody else other than the Chinese regime that's got that sort of leverage, and they're still working on it. They've been building or attempting to build significant leverage in Latin America, in Africa, parts of the Middle East. Over the past 20 years in particular, while we've been focused in the U.S. on the global war on terror, we tend to be sort of with blinders on. It sometimes seems that a U.S. administration, regardless of which administration, has a hard time multitasking. So all our focus is on the Middle East or counterterrorism. And we take our eye off the ball in Latin America. And then after a few years, we wonder, well, how come we have so many nations down there with governments that are hostile to our interests? Well, it's because we're not paying attention. We're not in there. We're not making an effort, not just dollars, but resources, personnel, strategic thinking.
We got about 2 minutes. Let's do that. I was going to ask you about Saudi Arabia, but in that vein here, locking down our hemisphere. I know we've talked before about the Panama Canal. We understand that. And we see the Belt and Road Initiative with China all through Panama and all over, up in Mexico. There's like Canadian ports in Mexico. It's crazy. How would you like to see this president and Secretary of State lock down our hemisphere tighter?
Yeah, I will look. We've got several issues here. Whether we're talking individual countries like Venezuela, Panama, Honduras. The Honduran president, she just spent some time lambasting, President Trump. And the Honduran presidential family, has had association and allegations of narco trafficking rumors for years now. So we shouldn't be paying attention to that. But what we have to always do, and I think they're doing it now, and I think President Trump's been clear about this, Marco Rubio's been clear about this, is we evaluate our relationship with each country based on what is in our best interest, because that's what the other countries are doing. We just tend to apologize for it or back away from it somehow over the years, thinking it's a community of nations, right? And if we're just open and generous and non-judgmental, and we don't worry about our own interests, well, the rest of the world will follow. Well, that's a bunch of crap, because that's not how it works. Every nation works in its own best interest. So we need to start from that premise. I think that's what they're doing. And with Latin America, look, it's an incredibly important part of the world. Our trade, our strategic thinking and intelligence, our security. We have to focus on it more. That means we have to devote more serious-minded individuals, more time, more resources, again, not just foreign aid, to develop closer relationships and to ensure that we don't wake up and, oh, look, we've lost another country in Latin America, and now they're aligned with China, or they're aligned with, sort of the BRICS nations who are kind of working to establish their own global order.
Yes. I'm so excited, if done well, to have control over our own hemisphere once again. Mike Baker, the great Mike Baker, host of the President's Daily Brief podcast, one of the most popular podcasts in the entire country. Mike, great to talk to you, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Amen. Next time you're riding camels in the desert, I'll be there for you once again.